The 2023 D1 baseball bracket has been unveiled. I've got Kendall Rogers, Aaron Fitt with me from D1Baseball.com. Guys, biggest takeaway from the bracket. What do you think of the field of 64?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The thing that really stands out to me is all the teams are seeded, I think, really well. The twos and the three seeds, they all feel appropriate, and the result is a tournament where I think all 16 regionals have as good competitive balance as I've ever seen during this process. They did a really good job. There's no regional for me that really jumps out as being lopsided, and so I think that's exciting. I think it's going to be a really really fun tournament.
Yeah, I kind of echo that, Michella. I just think when you look at these regionals across the board, last night I was kind of putting together, softest regional, toughest regional, and honestly, it was pretty difficult. Like I think if you look at all these regionals, there's a team or two that you're kind of like, okay, maybe they're not, maybe that's not such a soft draw, or maybe that seems like a little bit tougher draw than I thought. I kind of pinpoint Terre Haute, for instance, with Indiana State, Wright State, North Carolina, Iowa. The Lexington regional with, West Virginia, Kentucky. Those are kind of two regionals that I feel like, anybody could win that thing. So I think when you have regionals, anytime you have a postseason field, when you have regionals where you feel like anybody can win two or three regionals, I feel like the committee did a pretty good job in those pairings.
All right. I love it. So, okay, biggest surprise. What caught you the most off guard when the bracket was being unveiled? Aaron, we'll start with you.
Well, for me, it was Arizona getting in. That was the one team that, and they were, you're wrong. They played their way onto the bubble during the last 2 weeks of the season. They weren't on the bubble really most of the year. They weren't a factor. They went 12-18 in the Pac-12. They got swept 4 times in conference play, and they only won, 4 out of their 10 series. For them to get in over USC, which won 7 out of its 10 conference series and finished 5 games ahead of Arizona in the standings. Wow. This committee placed a lot of emphasis on how Arizona did in the conference tournament, which was strong. They reached the finals, and they did beat USC, right near the end of the season. So there's that, and they had a better RPI by a few spots. 45 versus 53 or something like that. So there you can make a defense for Arizona, but that was a real eyebrow raiser for a team that went 12-18 in the regular season to get in. Worst record for an at-large team in conference play since 2009.
Yeah, I think for me, I think UC Irvine not getting in. I really thought Benny Orloff's team should have gotten in. If you look at the comparison here, Louisiana, who got in the field, granted they went on a big run of the Sun Belt tournament, but Louisiana had a 13-16 record against RPI top 100. UC Irvine 19-11. Let's not forget that they had 7 or 8 wins against the top 50 2 weeks ago. Arizona State falling out of that mix is what caused their top 50 record to kind of fall off the map, so to speak. And John Cohen alluded to that yesterday, that their top 50 record wasn't great. Well, that's why. And so I thought UC Irvine was a club that should have gotten in the field. When you look at their intent to schedule, which is obviously a big thing to this committee, you look at that top 100 record, and they passed the eyeball test as well.
So you guys mentioned that it wasn't really easy to put together softest, toughest regionals, but I'm going to challenge you to do it anyway. Are there any, what are the toughest regionals you think, or the regionals with some serious upset potential?
Well, I do think, Kendall mentioned Terre Haute. One reason I think Terre Haute is fascinating is because you've got a very dangerous 4 seed in Wright State, a team that is always a factor. It feels like you've got, I think, the best 3 seed in the tournament in North Carolina, and you've got, Iowa is properly seeded as a 2, but any one of those teams or Indiana State could win that one. So that one stands out. But also, I'm going to say, South Carolina, we were a little surprised that they hosted after the way they played down the stretch. Not very well. Now you've got Campbell coming in as a hungry 2 seed that probably feels like they got snubbed for a host. I think they were more deserving to host in South Carolina. And you've got NC State, which is that proverbial house money team. Maybe they didn't know they were going to get in. They had a good RPI, but a lot of other issues with their resume. They're in as a 3 seed. They're extremely deep and powerful offensively. They can make a run. That's an offensive ballpark. If they pitch enough, and you've seen it at times this year, their pitching has been enough. At times it has not. But if they got that going right now, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Wolfpack make another run.
Yeah, I'll go with Stillwater. For me, is my toughest regional. I think when you look at Oklahoma State, obviously they're playing really well in the Big 12 tournament. Oral Roberts is a really tough 4 seed. It's kind of funny as we put together our projections. Oklahoma State fans are tweet at me at least, like, "Hey, quit putting ORU in our field." ORU's already beaten Oklahoma State this year, so getting them as a 4. Jonah Cox and the Golden Eagles are a really solid club. I saw them last year in the regional down in College Station. I think getting DBU as a 2 seed. A little bit like Campbell, like Aaron alluded to with Campbell, DBU is one of those teams that probably felt like they should have been a little bit more in the mix for a host side. They're going to come in this thing, breathing fire, so to speak. And then Washington, you have the third place Pac-12 team is your 3 seed that was 17-12 in the Pac this year. They're a really good club. Keep an eye on the name Kiefer Lord. He's a really talented pitcher for them. They've also got a really talented lineup with Will Simpson and company. So Washington is your 3. That's a tough 3 for me.
None of these are easy, but any team or top 16 seed that you like their path to the College World Series? Aaron, we'll start with you.
I'll tell you what. Wake Forest, as good a season as they've had, is not the answer to this question. I think their path is not easy. I'm giving you the opposite of the question you asked, but I mean, like, you would think that the team that is the top seed would maybe have that easy path, and I don't think so. And that with Maryland as a 2, Alabama is an underseeded 16 seed. But yeah, I mean, as far as the teams that have an easy path, I don't think there is one. I mean, I really do. I think all these teams, again, there's a very balanced, competitive fields this year, and not one of these 16 teams jumps out at me and says, "Oh, well, there you go. You can go ahead and pencil them in." I don't see it this year.
Wow.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Aaron on this question. I mean, if I was going to just have to pick one, I would say Arkansas a little bit. I mean, I get that Arizona played well for 1 week. I'm skeptical they can kind of rattle together another weekend like that. TCU certainly playing well, but really, other than those 2 teams, I think I really like the way Arkansas stacks up with any of the 4 teams in Terre Haute. I mean, knowing that they'll probably lose to one of those teams now that I've said that. But I just think they match up pretty well. I've seen Iowa this year. I think they match up pretty well with any of those 4 teams at Terre Haute. Granted, they take care of business against TCU, Arizona. Let's not forget Santa Clara. I don't want to snub Rusty Filter's team. They got a shot too.
Okay, guys, let's talk some hypotheticals. What are some of the craziest, juiciest potential super regional matchups that could happen?
I think Stanford Miami is intriguing to me as an 8-9 matchup potentially. Yeah. 2 traditional powers, of course. You've got Miami's playing great at the end of the year. I mean, they've had a very good year all the way through for the most part, but especially lately they've looked like an Omaha kind of team. And I think Stanford is one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country. They're seeded number 8, so they're not that far off from that. But I really believe this is one of the leading national title contenders coming off back-to-back College World Series appearances. So that would be for me a very fascinating super regional matchup.
Yeah, I think for me, Aaron kind of alluded to this as Wake Forest pathway to Omaha, but Alabama's playing as well as anybody in the country right now. They played great in Hoover. That will be a tough matchup for Wake Forest. They've got some frontline arms they can hit you with. Florida and South Carolina. I guess South Carolina is playing much different than they did where they were when they played Florida earlier this season. But let's not forget they swept Florida in. So that's another one for me. Then you kind of have what I consider like the new school versus the old school with potentially Vanderbilt and Oklahoma State. And since a lot of people kind of tweeted at me about this one, how about the potential of A&M and Texas winning Stanford and Coral Gables? I think that wasn't a coincidence. Those 2 teams could be paired up.
All right, so last one before we go. One storyline each. What's the biggest question mark for you? What are you looking forward to?
I want to see if the Deacs can do it now. Number 1 overall national seed. I know we talk about this every year, but their season this year is so similar to what Tennessee did last year in the regular season. I mean, they didn't win the ACC tournament. It's the only thing they didn't do. But if you line them up next to Tennessee, the dominance is it's eerily similar. And this kind of feels like, all right, it's their year now. We got to do it. This is our team. If we're not going to go hot with this team, then it's one of those things where it's like the weight of expectations. I wonder how they handle that, because we saw Tennessee's great years they had last year didn't get to Omaha.
Kendall.
Well, Aaron will pick on me for saying this, but I think I actually feel pretty good about Wake, and here's why. I think a lot of people aren't really looking at Wake, and I think a lot of people are very curious to see how LSU handles the postseason. This is the preseason darling because of all the transfers and things like that. LSU's been a little wobbly the last few weeks, and I don't think people are looking for Wake Forest to fail in the postseason. I think they're looking at LSU this weekend and then next weekend. So I think actually some of the pressure is lifted off of Wake. I think more people are kind of intrigued by what happens with LSU. So I think the biggest storyline for me is LSU. Is a portal-made team? Does a portal-made team go on a run and win the College World Series? I actually think that what LSU could do this year could have ramifications across college baseball, because if LSU rolls through this thing, wins the College World Series, then there are a lot of schools out there who go, hey, this is our pathway right here. So I think it's really intriguing.
All right, guys, exciting tournament coming up. Thanks so much, as always.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.